Get your filthy hands off my car, you piece of trash. The voice, a jagged blade of raw sewage, tore through the crisp autumn air of Chicago's Gold Coast. Officer Rick Jansen, a man whose face seemed permanently locked in a sneer of contempt, stormed across the pristine asphalt toward Dr. Marcus Thorne. Thorne, a man of quiet distinction, clad in a flawlessly tailored charcoal suit that cost more than Jansen's first car, had just exited his gleaming black Aston Martin. Before Thorne could even process the assault, Jansen slammed him against the cold, polished metal of the driver's side door. The force of the blow drove the air from his lungs. "Think you can pull this crap in my city?" Jansen snarled, twisting Thorne's arm with practiced brutality and forcing his hands onto the car's roof. On the exclusive, tree-lined street, a few well-heeled pedestrians slowed their pace, their curiosity piqued by the sudden violence. Have you ever been judged in the blink of an eye, your entire worth erased by someone else's prejudice? What you are about to witness will shatter every belief you hold about power, perception, and the fragile nature of justice in America. Before we unravel this shocking story, make sure you are subscribed and have clicked that notification bell. You will not want to miss the explosive conclusion. Thorne remained preternaturally calm, his voice a low, steady baritone that offered a stark contrast to Jansen's feral barking. "Officer, I assure you this is my vehicle." Jansen let out a short, mocking laugh that sounded like grinding gravel. "Right, and I'm the mayor of Chicago," he spat, yanking Thorne's arm higher behind his back, forcing a pained grunt. He shoved Thorne's face against the cool glass of the window. "Hands behind your head, now." The small crowd of onlookers was growing. Smartphones began to emerge from pockets and designer purses, their small, dark lenses transforming into a dozen unblinking eyes, recording every degrading second of the tableau unfolding before them. The late afternoon sun glinted off the platinum face of Thorne's Patek Philippe watch as his hands were forced into position, a beacon of his success now just a detail in his public humiliation. Just 6 hours earlier, Dr. Marcus Thorne's day had begun like any other. The soft, melodic alarm chimed at 5 a.m. in his sprawling, modernist home in Kenilworth, a wealthy suburb north of Chicago. The minimalist hallways were lined not with awards, but with family photos. His wife, Alana, a respected architect, their 2 children, a son at Stanford, and a daughter in her final year at the University of Chicago Laboratory Schools, and images from a life of quiet achievement and deep family bonds. A single, understated frame on his desk showed a younger Thorne shaking hands with a former U.S. president, the inscription simply reading, "Marcus, for your unwavering service." As he prepared his morning espresso, the news hummed in the background. A panel was discussing the controversial new federal police oversight initiatives. Anonymous officials from the newly formed Department of Police Accountability are pushing for a national database on officer misconduct, a pundit announced, and there's fierce resistance from local departments. Thorne allowed himself a small, wry smile. He adjusted the knot on his silk tie, listening with an intimacy the commentators could never fathom. He wasn't just familiar with those initiatives, he was their architect. Across the city, in a grimy precinct locker room on the south side, Officer Rick Jansen was already seething. "More of this DPA garbage?" he grumbled to his partner, a veteran cop who had long ago learned to just nod and let Jansen vent. "Some pencil-pushing bureaucrat in a fancy office who's never felt the pavement thinks he can tell us how to police our streets. It's a joke." The inside of Jansen's locker was a gallery of grievances, photos of himself standing triumphantly over handcuffed black and Latino men, newspaper clippings decrying police brutality that he'd defaced with a marker, and a thick complaint file shoved into a corner, its pages filled with allegations that always seemed to vanish into the bureaucratic ether. Jansen had been investigated 11 times in 6 years. Each time, the inquiry had stalled, witnesses had changed their stories, or evidence had mysteriously been misplaced. He felt untouchable. "I'm telling you, Dave," Jansen continued, slamming his locker shut. "Wait till one of these DPA hotshots gets a taste of the real world. They wouldn't last 5 minutes. Meanwhile, in a secure, soundproofed office on the 40th floor of a federal building overlooking Lake Michigan, Marcus Thorne reviewed a set of damning statistics. The nameplate on his door was intentionally vague. M. Thorne, Special Projects. But the documents on his desk read, Department of Police Accountability, Director's Briefing. Inside were color-coded charts and graphs that painted a horrifying picture of the Chicago Police Department. Arrest disparities that defied demographics, complaint patterns that pointed to organized corruption in specific precincts, and evidence of systematic misconduct that had been ignored for years. His phone buzzed, a text from Alana. "Don't forget Chloe's cello recital tonight." He typed back, "Leaving at 5, wouldn't miss it for the world." Jansen spent his afternoon patrol doing what he did best, hunting. He ignored the crackle of dispatch calls for domestic disputes or petty theft, focusing instead on high-end vehicles driven by people of color in neighborhoods he considered his personal territory. In 4 hours, he initiated 5 traffic stops. All 5 drivers were black or Hispanic. All 5 were subjected to aggressive questioning and invasive searches of their vehicles. None received a ticket. His dashboard camera recorded it all, a silent witness to his predatory policing. But Jansen knew the dirty secret. With thousands of hours of footage uploaded daily and a woefully understaffed internal affairs division, the odds of his tapes ever being reviewed were practically zero. He was a ghost in the machine. At 4:30 p.m., a new directive came over the radio. "All units be advised, the DPA is conducting random, unannounced audits of body camera usage and data integrity this week. Ensure all equipment is active and functioning per federal guidelines. SOAR." Jansen let out a string of curses. He hated the body camera, a federally mandated accessory he saw as a leash. He hadn't forgotten to activate it for the last 2 weeks. He had deliberately kept it off. Today, with a resentful sigh, he switched it on. Thorne left his headquarters at exactly 5 p.m. He always drove his personal car to community meetings, a practice he maintained to avoid the intimidating presence of a government motorcade. The meeting tonight was part of a listening tour he had initiated, a series of anonymous forums to gather raw, unfiltered feedback from citizens about their interactions with law enforcement. He was scheduled to speak, identified only as a senior federal official. The irony was a constant, bitter companion. For a year, he had been the invisible hand crafting policies to eradicate the very cancer of misconduct that had plagued departments like Chicago's for decades. His reforms demanded transparency, accountability, and severe consequences for officers who abused their power. Most cops resented the new rules, never imagining that their architect was a black man who had endured the sting of discrimination his entire life, from being followed in stores as a teenager to being randomly selected for secondary screenings at airports, even as a top government official. Jansen's radio crackled to life. Unit 714, report of a possible high-end vehicle theft in progress near Astor Street and North Avenue. "I've got it," Jansen responded, his voice filled with a predator's eagerness. The Gold Coast, his favorite hunting ground, an enclave of old money and new tech wealth, where, in his twisted worldview, a successful black man looked as out of place as a wolf in a sheep pen. Thorne found a parking spot directly in front of the community center, a beautiful old brownstone. He checked his watch. 5:15 p.m. Early, as always. He straightened his tie, grabbed the leather briefcase from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the cool evening air. Across the street, Jansen's patrol car slid to a halt. His eyes, honed by years of prejudice, immediately locked onto his target. The Aston Martin, the bespoke suit, the confident, unhurried posture. It was a perfect storm of everything that triggered Jansen's deepest resentments. He had no way of knowing he was about to confront the most powerful man in American law enforcement, the very man responsible for the body camera now recording his every move. And Thorne, a man who dealt in the theoretical architecture of justice, had no idea that his life's work was about to become a brutal, terrifying, and intensely personal reality. The stage was set. Two men, embodying the two warring souls of American justice, were on a collision course. Neither could have possibly predicted what would happen when raw, unchecked prejudice met its absolute, immovable object on that pristine Chicago street. "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" Thorne's voice was a study in control, each word carefully chosen, his expression a neutral mask that betrayed none of the cold fury beginning to coalesce in his gut. He'd been in this play before, but never on such a public stage. "Don't you officer me," Jansen snarled, shoving Thorne again, this time harder. The thud of Thorne's body against his own car door echoed between the stately brownstones. "Hands on the car, now." Thorne complied, the movements precise and economical. He placed his palms flat on the roof, feeling the ridiculousness of the situation wash over him. "Officer, I truly believe there has been a significant misunderstanding. This vehicle is registered to me." Jansen's laugh was a burst of derision as he began a pat-down that was less about searching for weapons and more about public degradation. "Your vehicle?" "Right. And I bet you're a brain surgeon, or a hotshot lawyer, or maybe even an astronaut." He deliberately raised his voice, playing to the growing audience on the sidewalk. Each word was a performance, designed to strip Thorne of his dignity layer by layer. "I work for the United States government," Thorne stated, his voice unwavering despite the humiliation of Jansen's hands roaming his body. "The federal government?" Jansen howled with theatrical laughter, yanking Thorne's wallet from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. "Doing what? Sorting mail in the basement? Don't try to pull that garbage on me, pal." By now, more than 24 people had stopped. A sea of smartphones was pointed in their direction, a silent digital jury. Thorne saw the red recording lights and felt a grim sense of relief mixed with profound dread. A record was being created, but at the cost of his humanity. Jansen fumbled with the wallet, his meaty fingers pulling out Thorne's driver's license. He held it up with exaggerated suspicion. "Dr. Marcus A. Thorne," he read aloud, his voice dripping with mockery. "Ooh, a doctor. What's that in, pal? Witchcraft? You buy that degree online?" He held the license up to the street lamp. "Address in Kenilworth. Real posh. No way a guy like you lives there legally." "Officer, your onboard computer can verify my identity, my address, and the vehicle's registration in less than 30 seconds, Thorne said, his patience, a finite resource, wearing dangerously thin. "Don't you tell me how to do my job," Jansen snapped. He grabbed Thorne's shoulder and spun him around, forcing him to face the crowd. "You see this? This is what happens. These people think they can just waltz into our best neighborhoods, boost luxury cars, and nobody's gonna notice. Well, I notice. I always notice." The crowd was growing restless, murmurs turning into audible protests. "That's excessive," shouted a woman in a business suit. An older man shook his head, his face a mask of disgust, but Jansen seemed to feed on the negative attention, puffing out his chest like a silverback gorilla asserting dominance. "Everyone back up," he bellowed at the onlookers. "This is an active crime scene. Anyone who interferes is getting arrested for obstruction." A second patrol car pulled up, and a younger, sharper-looking officer stepped out. Her name tag read Rostova. She approached the scene cautiously, her eyes taking in the whole picture. Jansen's theatrical aggression, the expensive car, the silent, dignified man in the suit, and the agitated crowd. Something was very wrong. She recognized Thorne's face, but couldn't place it. A politician? A CEO? "What's the situation, Rick?" Officer Eva Rostova asked, keeping her voice low and professional. "Caught this clown red-handed trying to steal this Aston," Jansen announced proudly. "Probably lifted the keys from some rich lady's purse. They're getting brazen, Eva. Real brazen." Rostova's eyes narrowed. She saw the Patek Philippe watch, the perfect fit of the suit, and most importantly, the man's incredible composure under fire. Car thieves didn't act like this. Car thieves ran or fought or blubbered. They didn't stand with the posture of a king and speak with the precision of a scholar while being manhandled. "Officer," Thorne said, addressing Rostova directly, his gaze steady and commanding, "I am formally requesting that you call your supervising officer to this scene. This encounter is escalating without cause, and I believe my civil rights are being violated." "Shut your mouth," Jansen barked, twisting Thorne's arm again. "You don't get to make requests." He turned to the car and began a haphazard search of the interior, pulling out registration papers and insurance documents and tossing them onto the street with contemptuous flicks of his wrist. Thorne's leather briefcase, which had been sitting on the passenger seat, tumbled out, falling open on the pavement. Official-looking documents, bound in blue covers, scattered across the ground. Rostova instinctively stepped closer to look. Her breath caught in her throat. She saw the official letterhead, the classification stamps, the federal seals. And then she saw the words: Department of Police Accountability, Office of the Director. "Rick," she whispered urgently, tugging on his sleeve. "Rick, maybe we should slow down. Take a breath." "Slow down? For what?" Jansen shot back, not even looking at her as he continued his performative ransacking. "So he can get away with it because he's wearing a nice suit? That's the whole damn problem with this job today, Ava. No guts." Thorne's phone, still in his jacket pocket on the roof of the car, began to buzz insistently. The screen lit up. The caller ID was partially visible. "Didi Rossi, urgent." Rostova saw it. Deputy Director? Her blood ran cold. The pieces were starting to click into place with a sickening finality. "Rick, I'm serious," she said, her voice now firm. "Stop." "Officer Jansen," Thorne said, his own voice now taking on a new edge of command. "I am giving you a final opportunity to de-escalate this situation. Contact your watch commander, now. This will not end the way you imagine it will." "Giving me an opportunity?" Jansen's voice rose to a near scream, his face turning a blotchy red. "You're about to be wearing cuffs, you arrogant son of a bitch. You don't give me anything." He leaned in close, his face inches from Thorne's, his breath hot and sour. "Know your place. This is my world, my streets, my rules." The crowd was now openly hostile. "This is a disgrace," someone shouted. "Leave him alone," yelled another. A teenager, her phone held high like a torch, screamed, "You're going viral, you racist pig!" Jansen, fueled by the chaos, seemed to reach a decision. He turned back to the car, his movements suddenly furtive. From a small pouch on his utility belt, he palmed a tiny plastic baggie filled with a white, crystalline powder. It was a move he had perfected, a sleight of hand honed over years of similar encounters. With the crowd and Rostova distracted by his previous outburst, he slipped the baggie deep into the crevice between the driver's seat and the center console. "Well, well, well," he announced a moment later, his voice dripping with faux surprise and triumph. "What do we have here?" He held the baggie up for everyone to see, a magician revealing his trick. "Looks like we've got some cocaine. A felony amount, I'd say. Possession with intent to distribute." Thorne turned to face him, the mask of calm finally cracking to reveal eyes blazing with the fire of righteous glacial fury. "Officer," he said, his voice dangerously low, "that substance is not mine. and both you and I know precisely where it came from." "Right," Jansen smirked, waving the baggie like a trophy. "It's never theirs. Just magically appears out of thin air, right? Rains down from the sky into six-figure sports cars." He turned to the crowd. "See? This is what I'm talking about. Your classic high-level dealer." Rostova stepped forward, her face pale with panic and disgust. "Rick, we need to test that. We need to follow procedure." "Test it?" Jansen scoffed. "Looks like Coke. Smells like Coke. It's Coke. Don't go soft on me, Eva. We're booking him." Thorne looked directly at the nearest phone camera, his voice ringing out with absolute authority. "To everyone recording this, I want you to remember exactly what you are witnessing. Document everything, every word, every action. The truth has a way of coming to light, and when it does, there will be a reckoning." "Truth?" Jansen spat the word out like it was poison. "The truth is you're a punk-ass drug dealer who thought his fancy clothes would make him invisible. Well, guess what, doctor? Not on my watch." As Jansen reached for his handcuffs, a triumphant glint in his eye, Thorne's phone rang again. This time it lay flat on the car's roof, the screen clearly visible to Rostova and several people in the crowd. The caller ID read, "ESSEC Def, Pentagon Urgent." Rostova felt like she was going to be physically sick. The face, the documents, the phone calls. It wasn't a politician. It wasn't a CEO. She'd seen him before. On a national security briefing broadcast on C-SPAN, in an official photo standing next to the Attorney General, the man who had been appointed by the president to clean up American policing. "Rick," she whispered, her voice trembling as she grabbed his arm. "For the love of God, stop. I know who he is." "I know who he is too," Jansen shot back, completely oblivious, consumed by his own narrative. "He's a felon, and I'm the law." He snapped the first handcuff onto Thorne's wrist. "Game over, fancy man. Welcome to the real world." But the real world was about to detonate in Officer Rick Jansen's face. The metallic click of the handcuffs around Marcus Thorne's wrists sounded like a starting pistol in the stunned silence. Jansen, puffed up with a sense of righteous victory, paraded his prisoner toward the patrol car. "Watch your head," he sneered, shoving Thorne into the back seat with unnecessary force. "Wouldn't want you to mess up that pretty face before your mugshot." He slammed the door, the sound echoing his finality. Inside the car, Thorne sat with an almost unnerving stillness. His mind, trained for crisis and strategic analysis, was already 10 steps ahead. The public humiliation was a sunk cost. Now it was about damage control, and more importantly, accountability. He knew Deputy Director Rossi would have already triggered Code Sovereign the moment his second call went to voicemail. It was a protocol reserved for the disappearance or incapacitation of a cabinet-level official. A GPS trace would be active. A federal rapid response team would be mobilizing. Rostova slid into the passenger seat, her hands visibly shaking. "Rick, we have to call this in. We have to talk to the watch commander before we get to the precinct. I'm telling you, you've made a catastrophic mistake." "The only mistake," Jansen spat, peeling away from the curb, "is you losing your nerve. This is a textbook caller. Stolen car, felony weight, resisting. This is a career arrest, Ava. You should be thanking me." "He wasn't resisting," she said quietly. "He was arguing," Jansen countered. "In my book, that's resisting." At the 18th District Precinct, a historic building that felt more like a museum than a modern police station, Desk Sergeant Kowalski saw them bring Thorne in and felt an immediate, prickling sense of unease. He recognized Thorne from a recent citywide security briefing. He couldn't place the name, but he knew the face was attached to immense federal power. He watched Jansen shove Thorne toward the booking desk, his stomach tightening into a knot. "Hey, Miller," Kowalski whispered to another officer. "Get the watch commander on the phone. Tell him it's urgent." Jansen was in his element, regaling the other officers in the booking area. Got ourselves a real big shot tonight, boys. Thinks his $1,000 suit makes him bulletproof. Well, he's about to find out what a real jail cell looks like. During processing, Thorne answered every question in a clear, level voice that cut through the usual chaos of the booking room. When the officer asked for his occupation, he stated simply and without embellishment, "Director, United States Department of Police Accountability." Jansen roared with laughter. "Director? Of what, the freaking post office? These guys kill me, always trying to make themselves sound important." When they brought Thorne to the phone for his one permitted call, Jansen smirked. "Go ahead, Director. Call your lawyer. Better yet, call your supplier. Tell him you're going to be out of business for a while." Thorne ignored him. His handcuffs were removed for the call. He dialed a 10-digit number from memory. After 2 rings, a voice answered. Thorne's words were quiet, but they carried the weight of an avalanche. "This is Director Thorne. I am in custody at the 18th District, Chicago Police Department. Execute code, sovereign, full effect." Sergeant Kowalski, who had crept closer, overheard the words. His face went chalk white. Code. Sovereign wasn't just a federal protocol. It was a ghost story, a legend among local law enforcement. It signified a direct threat to a protected national security asset. He had never, in his 30 years on the force, heard of it actually being used. Jansen, oblivious, snatched the phone from Thorne's hand. "Time's up, superstar. Let's get you to your new home." As Thorne was led toward the holding cells, the other detainees, the usual mix of drunks, dealers, and petty thieves, fell silent. They saw the suit, the watch, the quiet, unshakable dignity. This man did not belong here. "Yo, suit," one of them called out. "What'd they get you for?" Thorne paused, turning his head slightly. "A teachable moment," he replied, his voice echoing slightly in the tiled hallway. Outside the precinct, the quiet street was suddenly anything but. A fleet of black Chevrolet Suburbans, devoid of any markings but bristling with antennas, descended on the block, their tires whispering on the pavement. Doors opened in unison, and a dozen men and women in dark, functional suits and tactical gear emerged. They moved with the chilling, silent efficiency of a Special Forces unit. Watch Commander Miller was on the phone with his wife, arguing about dinner, when his private line buzzed. The caller ID was a blocked number. "Miller." The voice on the other end was like cracking ice. "Commander, this is Deputy Director Isabella Rossi of the DPA. We have a code, Sovereign Alert, indicating that Director Marcus Thorne is being held at your facility. I need to know who authorized his arrest, and I need to know it 10 seconds ago." Miller felt the blood drain from his face. "Did you say Director Thorne? The Director Thorne?" "There is only one, Commander," Rossi replied, "and you have him in a holding cell. I strongly suggest you locate the arresting officer and secure the premises, because my team is 2 minutes from your front door. Handle this badly, and you'll be directing traffic in rural Alaska for the rest of your career. Am I clear?" Miller dropped the phone into its cradle. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely press the intercom button. "Get me Jansen and Rostova. In my office, now." He grabbed the arrest report from the intake basket, and his eyes widened in horror as he read the charges. Grand theft auto, felony possession with intent to distribute. In the precinct break room, Jansen was holding court, reliving his glorious arrest. "And then I find the coke. Right under the seat. The guy thought his fancy talk would get him out of it, but..." His radio squawked. "Unit 714, Officer Jansen, report to the watch commander's office on the double." "See." Jansen grinned at the other cops. "Commander probably wants to give me a commendation. Biggest caller this precinct's seen all year." Rostova followed him down the hall, her heart pounding a sick rhythm against her ribs. She had been frantically trying to search for Director Marcus Thorne, DPA, on her phone, but the precinct's ancient Wi-Fi was failing her. As they rounded the corner to Miller's office, neither of them saw the team of federal agents sweeping silently and purposefully through the precinct's main entrance, their badges displayed, their faces carved from granite. The system wasn't just about to correct itself. It was about to bring the full, terrifying weight of the United States federal government down on the head of one arrogant, prejudiced police officer. Justice was no longer a concept. It was a tactical team clearing the building. Watch Commander Miller looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. He stood, pale and trembling, behind his desk as Jansen and Rostova entered his office. Flanking him were two of the federal agents, their postures radiating an aura of lethal competence. Standing in the center of the room was a woman in a severe, dark suit, her expression a mask of controlled fury. "Officer Jansen," Miller's voice was a dry croak. "Can you please explain to me, and to Deputy Director Rossi, exactly who you took into custody tonight?" Jansen's bravado began to falter, the smug confidence leaking out of him like air from a slashed tire. Some perp, driving a stolen Aston Martin, had him dead to rights." His voice lacked its earlier conviction. Deputy Director Rossi stepped forward, her heels clicking sharply on the worn linoleum floor. Her FBI credentials were clipped to her belt, but she didn't need them. Her authority was absolute. "Officer Jansen, let me be perfectly clear. The man you arrested, handcuffed, and charged with multiple felonies is Director Marcus Thorne. He is my boss. He is the head of the United States Department of Police Accountability. He is a cabinet-level appointee who reports directly to the President of the United States. And the Aston Martin you thought was stolen is his personal vehicle, which is armored, equipped with secure federal communications, and currently being monitored by the Secret Service." The color drained from Jansen's face. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Behind him, Rostova closed her eyes, a wave of sickening relief and terror washing over her. That's not possible," Jansen finally stammered. I found drugs in the car." "The drugs you found," another agent interjected, stepping forward with a tablet, "were planted by you. We've already reviewed your body camera footage." He turned the screen towards Jansen. Crystal-clear video, time-stamped and undeniable, showed the sleight of hand. The baggie emerging from Jansen's belt pouch and being tucked into the car seat. "We've also cross-referenced it with Officer Rostova's footage and the footage from 15 civilian cell phones that were immediately uploaded to social media. You performed the same illegal act in front of 24 witnesses." Jansen's knees buckled. He instinctively reached for the back of a chair to steady himself. I didn't know," he whispered. "That is the entire point." Rossi's voice was a whip crack. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You saw a black man in a luxury car, and your tiny, prejudiced mind filled in the rest. Your bigotry was so profound, so absolute, that you were incapable of seeing the truth, even when it was standing right in front of you, quoting departmental procedure." Miller finally found his voice, a pathetic squeak. "Officer Jansen, you are suspended, effective immediately. Surrender your badge and service weapon." With hands that shook so violently he could barely unclip his badge, Jansen placed it on Miller's desk. The metallic clink sounded like a death knell. His gun followed, landing with a heavy final thud. "Where is Director Thorne?" Rossi demanded. "Holding cell 3, Miller whispered. I'll get him right now." As Miller scrambled out of the office, Rossi turned her attention back to the shell-shocked Jansen. "Do you have any idea what you've done tonight? The man you brutalized on that street is the author of every single police reform initiative you and your buddies complain about in your locker room. The mandatory body cameras, the federal oversight, the national misconduct database. He built it all to stop cops exactly like you." Rostova spoke up. her voice quiet but steady. "Ma'am, I tried to tell him. I saw the documents. I told him to slow down, to call a supervisor." Rossi's gaze softened almost imperceptibly as she looked at Rostova. "We know, officer. Your body camera audio corroborates your account. Your conduct will be reviewed, but the initial evidence suggests you attempted to avert this catastrophe." Footsteps hurried down the hall. Miller returned, followed by Director Thorne, who was rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had been. A deeply mortified Sergeant Kowalski trailed behind them. Thorne's suit was rumpled, his hair slightly disheveled, but his dignity was a suit of armor that no amount of humiliation could pierce. "Marcus," Rossi said, rushing to his side. "Are you all right? Do you need a medic?" "I'm fine, Isabella," Thorne said, his voice calm but carrying the immense weight of the ordeal. "But there is work to be done." He turned and faced Jansen, who seemed to shrink under his gaze. The room fell utterly silent. Jansen could not meet his eyes. "Officer Jansen," Thorne said, and the quiet authority in his voice made everyone in the room stand a little straighter. "Look at me." Slowly, painfully, Jansen raised his head. His face was a wreck of shame, fear, and disbelief. "Do you understand what has transpired here tonight?" Thorne continued, his tone that of a professor dissecting a failed experiment. "You did not merely arrest an innocent man. You provided a live-action, real-time demonstration of a systemic disease. Your actions tonight have given the Department of Police Accountability its defining case study. You have become the poster child for everything my department was created to fight." "Director, I'm sorry," Jansen choked out. "I didn't know who you were." "And that," Thorne said, his voice hardening, "is the most damning indictment of all. My identity should be irrelevant. You shouldn't need to know my title to treat me with respect. You shouldn't need to see a federal seal to follow the law. You shouldn't need the threat of my authority to refrain from planting evidence on a citizen of the United States." The room was frozen, a tableau of broken authority and ascendant justice. "Every decision you made tonight," Thorne went on, "from the moment you saw me, was dictated by the color of my skin. You saw me not as a citizen, a doctor, a father, or a man, but as a stereotype. And you acted on that prejudice with the full, violent force of the law. You became the very thing you swore an oath to fight against." Jansen's voice was a barely audible whisper. "What's going to happen to me?" Rossi answered before Thorne could. "You're being taken into federal custody. Tonight. You'll be charged with aggravated kidnapping under color of law, fabrication of evidence, perjury, and multiple violations of federal civil rights statutes. Each charge carries a minimum of 10 years in a federal penitentiary, and that's just for starters." Thorne straightened his suit jacket and addressed Commander Miller. "Commander, I want federal investigators to review every single arrest Officer Jansen has made in his entire career, every traffic stop, every complaint filed against him, every use of force report. We are going to dismantle his legacy of corruption piece by piece." The transformation was absolute. The victim had been revealed as the system's ultimate arbiter. The hunter was now caged, and Officer Rick Jansen was about to learn that the justice he had so casually perverted was a force of nature, and he was standing at the epicenter of the storm. Within an hour, the Department of Police Accountability's Chicago field office had become a fortress of controlled chaos. Director Thorne, showing no signs of the trauma he'd endured, commanded the room with quiet intensity. Teams of analysts, lawyers, and veteran investigators moved with grim purpose, the air crackling with the energy of a historic mission. The case was no longer just about the wrongful arrest of a high-ranking official. It was about excavating a deep-seated rot within the Chicago Police Department. "Forensics are done with the baggie," Agent Morrison reported, his face tight with disgust. "As suspected, it's a mix of powdered sugar and crushed caffeine pills, a classic throwdown concoction, non-illegal, but visually convincing enough for a field test to come back ambiguous, creating probable cause for an arrest. Thorne nodded, his eyes fixed on a massive monitor displaying Jansen's entire service record. It's a predator's tool, designed to justify an illegal search and secure a conviction through intimidation and plea bargains. What does his arrest history tell us? Morrison keyed in a command, and the screen populated with horrifying clarity. It's worse than we thought, sir. In his 6 years on the force, Rick Jansen made 9 to 12 arrests. Of those, 803 were of black or Latino males. That's an 88% ratio in a city that is roughly 33% black and 29% Latino. Statistically, that's not policing. It's hunting. Pull up the disposition of his drug charges, Thorne commanded. The data shifted, revealing an even more damning pattern. Here's the linchpin, Director. 92% of Jansen's felony drug arrests were eventually pleaded down to misdemeanors or dismissed entirely by the DA's office for evidentiary issues. He wasn't building cases that would stick. He was ruining lives, creating arrest records and disrupting communities, knowing full well most of his evidence was fabricated. Each statistic was a ghost, the specter of a life irrevocably altered, a lost job, a broken family, a future stolen by a corrupt cop and a system that enabled him. Deputy Director Rossi entered the command center, a thick file in her hands. Marcus, it started. The local news broke the story of your arrest an hour ago. We muted your identity, referring to you only as a senior federal official. But the narrative of a black man being framed by a white cop has ignited a firestorm. Our tip line has received over 200 calls in the last hour from people claiming to be victims of Officer Jansen. She opened the file. It was a deluge of human misery. Dr. Alistair Finch, a pediatric oncologist at Rush University Medical Center, arrested by Jansen at 2 a.m. in the hospital parking garage after a 20-hour shift, trying to save a child's life. Charged with possession of narcotics that turned out to be his legally prescribed Ambien. He spent 48 hours in Cook County Jail and was suspended from the hospital for 2 weeks pending an investigation. The charges were dropped, but his reputation was savaged. Thorne looked at the mugshot of the exhausted, terrified doctor. Keep going. Javier Morales, a master carpenter and small business owner, pulled over by Jansen 17 times in 3 years. Each time his truck was torn apart in a roadside search. He was arrested twice on planted evidence charges that were later dismissed. He lost 2 major contracts because he couldn't make it to job sites. He had to lay off 4 employees. He's on the verge of bankruptcy. Samuel Adebayo, a PhD student in engineering at Northwestern, handcuffed and arrested in front of his 6-year-old son for matching the description of a robbery suspect. The description was black male in a coat. It was February in Chicago. His son has had nightmares ever since and is terrified of police officers. Thorne closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing the sheer scale of the collateral damage. This wasn't just about bad policing. This was a form of domestic terrorism, waged by a man in a blue uniform against the citizens he was sworn to protect. I want to interview him, Thorne said, his voice quiet but absolute. Set it up. A recorded, on-the-record interrogation. Sir, the U.S. Attorney's Office advises against it, Rossi countered gently. You are the primary victim. Anything you say could be used by his defense to claim coercion or bias. That's precisely why I must be the one to do it, Thorne replied, his eyes snapping open, clear and resolute. Dr. Finch never got to confront the man who humiliated him. Mr. Morales never got to demand an answer for why his livelihood was destroyed. Samuel Adebayo's son never got a voice. I have a voice, Isabella, and I will use it to speak for every single person this man has victimized. 2 days later, Thorne sat across a cold steel table from Rick Jansen in a sterile interrogation room in the federal building. The transformation was shocking. The swaggering, arrogant cop was gone, replaced by a hollowed-out shell of a man in a wrinkled orange jumpsuit. His eyes were bloodshot. His hands trembled. He had waived his right to an attorney, a desperate last-ditch attempt to appear cooperative. "Please state your full name for the record," Thorne began, his voice calm and professionally detached. Richard Allen Jansen," he mumbled. "Mr. Jansen, do you know why you're here?" "Because I arrested you," he whispered, staring at the table. Thorne leaned forward, his presence filling the small room. "No, you are here because you waged a one-man war against the citizens of Chicago. My arrest was not the crime. It was the mistake that allowed us to uncover the crime. Let's talk about Dr. Alistair Finch." Jansen looked up, his face a mask of confusion. Thorne pushed a photograph of the oncologist across the table. "Pediatric oncologist. You arrested him on March 12th of last year. You claim to have found a bag of unmarked pills during a search. Do you recall this arrest?" "I make a lot of arrests," Jansen stammered. "Perhaps you'll recall this one," Thorne continued, sliding another file across the table. "Javier Morales, carpenter. You pulled him over for a broken tail light. Your own body camera footage shows the light was functioning perfectly. You then proceeded to conduct an illegal search and claimed to find cocaine residue on his dashboard. Forensics found nothing. The charges were dropped, but not before Mr. Morales lost the biggest contract of his career. Does this refresh your memory, Mr. Jansen?" For 3 hours, Thorne continued the relentless, methodical deconstruction of Jansen's career. He used no raised voices, no threats, no intimidation. He used only facts. Case after case, victim after victim, lie after lie. He presented Jansen with a perfect, undeniable mosaic of his own corruption. "You see the pattern, don't you, Mr. Jansen?" Thorne said, his voice patient, almost academic. "Your entire policing philosophy was based on a single, flawed premise, that you could determine guilt based on skin color and zip code. You saw yourself not as a peace officer, but as a warrior, and the communities you patrolled were not your constituents, but your enemy territory." Jansen finally broke. Sobs racked his body, pathetic, gulping sounds in the silent room. "I was just trying to get the bad guys off the street," he cried. "No," Thorne said, his voice turning to steel. "You were the bad guy. You were the one breaking the law. You were the one terrorizing innocent families. The people you arrested were doctors, students, fathers, and business owners. Their only crime, in your eyes, was daring to succeed while being black or brown." Thorne stood, straightening his tie. "This interview is over. You will be prosecuted to the absolute fullest extent of federal law." As he reached the door, Jansen called out, his voice choked with desperation. "Wait, I can help you. There are others. Cops who do the same thing. I can give you names. I can testify." Thorne paused, his hand on the doorknob. His hand on the... He turned back slowly. "Your cooperation will be noted by the prosecutor, Mr. Jansen. It may affect your sentence. But I want you to understand something. A deal won't cleanse your soul. It will not undo the damage you have done to hundreds of lives. And it will not restore the faith you and officers like you have shattered. Justice is coming for you, and for every officer whose name you give us." Outside the room, Rossi was waiting. "Sir, it's bigger than we imagined. The information from Jansen, cross-referenced with our own data mining, has implicated a dozen other officers in his precinct. They were running it like an organized criminal enterprise, targeting minorities, fabricating evidence, and falsifying reports, and Internal Affairs was covering for them. Then we expand the investigation," Thorne said without hesitation. "This is no longer the Jansen case. This is the Chicago conspiracy. I want every one of them. I want the system that protected them. We will tear it down to the foundation and rebuild it." The teachable moment was over. The revolution had begun. 6 months later, the courtroom of Judge Eleanor Vance was silent, the air thick with anticipation. Rick Jansen, physically diminished and emotionally broken, stood before the bench to receive his sentence. He had pleaded guilty to a sweeping array of federal charges, his testimony having led to the indictment of 14 other Chicago police officers, including 2 lieutenants from Internal Affairs. In the gallery sat dozens of Jansen's victims. Dr. Finch was there, next to Javier Morales, who had managed to save his business thanks to a victims' compensation fund established by the DPA. Samuel Adebayo was there, his young son sitting quietly beside him, watching intently, and in the front row, a silent pillar of authority, sat Director Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Jansen," Judge Vance began, her voice echoing with the moral weight of the moment. "Your actions represent a profound betrayal of the public trust, a cancer of prejudice that metastasized within a system designed to protect. You did not just break your oath, you made a mockery of it." The judge recounted the sheer scale of the corruption, the 412 wrongful convictions that had been overturned, the lives derailed, the families traumatized. She spoke of the courage of Officer Eva Rostova, whose immediate cooperation and testimony had been crucial, and who was now being hailed as a hero and a model for a new generation of policing. "The incident that brought this darkness to light," the judge continued, looking directly at Thorne, "was a crucible. Director Thorne could have used his immense power to quietly resolve his own case. Instead, he chose to stand in for every voiceless victim and use his ordeal as a catalyst for unprecedented national reform. The Thorne reforms, as they were now known, had been fast-tracked through Congress. The National Misconduct Database was now a reality. Federal funding for police departments was now directly tied to their compliance with strict DPA standards for body camera usage, de-escalation training, and independent civilian oversight. "Therefore," Judge Vance declared, her voice ringing through the courtroom, "it is the sentence of this court that you, Richard Jansen, will serve 25 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole." A collective gasp, then quiet sobs of relief, rippled through the gallery. Justice, long delayed and long denied, had finally been delivered. After the sentencing, Thorne stood on the steps of the courthouse, not before a throng of reporters, but with the victims. He shook every hand, listened to every story, and accepted their thanks with quiet humility. Javier Morales gripped his hand. "Director, you gave me my life back, my employees, their families. We all thank you." Thorne placed his other hand on Morales's shoulder. "Your resilience, Mr. Morales, is what will help rebuild the trust that was broken. We are all in this together." A year later, Thorne returned to that same street on the Gold Coast. A small, elegant bronze plaque was now affixed to the wall of the community center. It read, "On this spot, a great injustice began, and a great reckoning followed. This marks the place where we, as a city, chose accountability over apathy. May we never forget." He was there to cut the ribbon on the Rostova Center for Community Policing, a new training and outreach facility, with the now promoted Captain Eva Rostova by his side. The center was a living embodiment of the new philosophy, policing with the community, not against it. "Use of force complaints are down 60% citywide," Rostova told him, a proud smile on her face. "Minority recruitment is up 30%. We're a long way from perfect, Director, but we're no longer at war with the people we serve." As Thorne addressed the crowd, he saw Samuel Adebayo and his son in the front row. The boy, now 7, looked up at the police officers standing nearby, not with fear, but with curiosity. "Change is not a single event," Thorne told the audience. "It is a relentless process. It is born in moments of crisis, but it is sustained by the daily courage of ordinary people who refuse to look away, who demand better, and who hold power accountable. Have you ever seen something you knew was wrong and stayed silent, hoping someone else would step up? What this story proves is that every voice matters. Every cell phone that records an injustice, every citizen who files a complaint, every officer who has the courage to cross that thin blue line to report a colleague contributes to the tide of change. If this story has moved you, if it has made you think about your own role in demanding justice, then let us know in the comments below. What does accountability look like to you? This isn't just a story, it's a conversation we all need to have. Hit that like button to show your support for real ref.